I'm going to get started here. Thanks everyone for coming to my workshop. My name's Damien. Last year I did a workshop at BitBlockBoom and had some hands-on coding exercises because I wanted to, I don't know, that's what I feel like a workshop should be. Have some hands-on stuff, but this time it's not going to be that because didn't get it together, and I think this will be more interesting this way. Hopefully you can just come away from this understanding a little bit more about Lightning. But last time my goal was to kind of inspire people to start building on Bitcoin, because writing code is just kind of a skill like any other. You just got to start learning and you'll figure it out. So if you're interested in any of these things that I talk about today, then definitely consider just, I don't know, getting in and trying to write some code, because I think that's the best way to learn about these things. So today I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin's connective tissue, which is Lightning, and how Lightning can act as a bridge or like the settlement layer between all these different off-chain protocols. And when I say protocol, that's kind of a word that gets thrown around a lot. And what we mean by that is just a set of rules that software can follow so that they can all work together. So that's how we're able to have all these different Bitcoin wallets, all these different Lightning wallets that all can send to each other without having to have some centralized thing like Google, where you have to log in with Google in order to use these things. We're just following the same rules, playing the same game, so we're able to be interoperable. And when I talk about off-chain protocols specifically, these are protocols that allow us to use our Bitcoin in different ways to send it around and receive it without making on-chain transactions every single time we use our Bitcoin. So the ecosystem that we'll be talking about today looks something like this, where we have on-chain Bitcoin, and then above that we have the Lightning Network, and then we have these 4 protocols that I'm going to talk about today, which one is Cashew, which is a custodial Chaumian eCash protocol. And then there's Spark, which is a relatively new off-chain protocol created by LightSpark and focused on enhancing payments on Bitcoin. There's Fedimint, which is kind of similar to Cashew in that they both use eCash, but Fedimint is federated, so there's not a single custodian. Instead, the funds are held collaboratively amongst what they call these guardians. And finally, I'm going to talk about Nostr Wallet Connect, which is just sort of a bonus protocol that doesn't actually, you can't hold Bitcoin in Nostr Wallet Connect, but it can become this kind of universal interface that all these other protocols can use to send and receive Bitcoin. So you can enable Bitcoin payments in your apps by just implementing Nostr Wallet Connect. And this is kind of how funds can flow around this ecosystem. We have Lightning at the center there, and each of these protocols on top supports Lightning. And so what that means is Spark can send and receive from Lightning, so can Cashew. So Spark can go through Lightning, and a user can receive funds in their Cashew wallet. Same with Fedimint. You could go from Cashew to Fedimint or anywhere you want. And Spark and Fedimint also natively support on-chain payments. So if you wanted to, you could go directly from on-chain to Spark and Fedimint. And then another interesting thing here is we can go from Lightning to on-chain, which I'll go through an example of how that works. You don't even have to open or close channels to do that. So what that means is we can be in these higher level protocols and go all the way down back on chain. So maybe you don't necessarily trust the Cashew mint, but you want to use the features that it offers. So you use it while you can, and then later you have enough money in your Cashew wallet that you're kind of scared, and you can go through the Lightning Network and get your money back on chain into your cold storage wallet. So this kind of all comes down to trade-offs when we're looking at which protocols and tools we want to use. And some trade-offs to consider are, one is settlement. So where does the Bitcoin settle? Who's holding the keys to your Bitcoin? And also, how long does it take for a transaction to be considered final? On Bitcoin, on the blockchain, it takes 10 minutes. And then maybe if you want to wait for a couple blocks, then it could take 20 or 30. Another is security. So how sure are you if you leave your wallet on the table that you'll come back tomorrow and your money will still be there? Like probably kind of risky, but if you lock your wallet up in a safe, then you can be pretty sure it'll still be there tomorrow. And finally, sovereignty. So are there third parties required to use your Bitcoin? Or can you just sign a transaction and broadcast it to the blockchain and not have to ask for permission? So a question that I would ask is, can something be the perfect solution? Especially since Cashew came out, there's been a lot of talk and haters on custodial solutions because people think that we should be focusing all our efforts on Lightning as sort of this scaling solution. And they're complaining that too much developer energy is going into these other protocols. But I like to think of Lightning as being like the solution that it offers is this settlement layer, but it's not necessarily, I don't think, going to be used for end user payments. So we need to kind of consider, depending on what the features are that we're looking for, consider these other protocols. So just a quick overview of what the rest of the workshop will go over. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means to be on chain, and then spend a lot of time on atomic swaps, which are how we're able to go between a lot of these protocols. And then we'll talk about Spark, Fedimint, Cashew, and how we can delegate access to our different Bitcoin wallets using Nostr Wallet Connect. So the world of on-chain looks something like this. This is mempool.space. You can see on the right there, those are blocks that have already been mined. Transactions are confirmed. And on the left is the mempool. So those are transactions that people have broadcast and most likely going to end up in the next blocks. But it's kind of uncertain at this point. Once a miner mines it, then it's in there for good. These are Bitcoin addresses. So you can share this with people and they can send money to it. And this is how you receive Bitcoin into your on-chain Bitcoin wallet. So if you have a cold storage wallet and you've been sure to like keep your seed offline and not show it to anyone, and you generate one of these Bitcoin addresses, then you can be sure that if someone sends money to it, it's the equivalent of putting your wallet in the safe. It's like there's no chance someone's gonna take it from you. But if we want to go around to these other protocols, we can use atomic swaps. So atomic swaps allow us to trustlessly exchange value across protocols. So you could kind of think like escrow, where there's a buyer and a seller, and someone has $1 million and the other person has the title to a house. How do you make that swap without trusting each other? So in that example, we use an escrow service where you give a third party the money and the title, and they perform the swap for you because both sides of the transaction trust this escrow service to do their job. But we'll be doing this with cryptography and open source protocols. So as long as both parties trust the protocol, then they can swap trustlessly. In order to perform an atomic swap, there's two main requirements. For what we're going to be talking about, we need Lightning. And Lightning will be the way that the pre-image is revealed. And I'll introduce these things and then get more into like what a pre-image is. But we'll need the Lightning network to reveal the pre-image, because the way that Lightning works is when you make a payment, in order for the payment to be completed, you get the pre-image back. And the pre-image can just be thought of as a secret. And then on the other side of the swap, we'll need some protocol with smart contracting abilities. And I don't mean like Ethereum's EVM or anything like that. It's just basically like the ability to say, if you can present this secret to me, then I'll give you the money. Otherwise, if some time has elapsed, then the money can be refunded. And if we have those requirements met, then an atomic swap is just 3 steps. There's the setup phase, where one party will generate a pre-image. It's just a big random number they keep secret to themselves, and they create an invoice, a Lightning invoice, and a funding transaction. So the funding transaction is on the side that can do smart contracting, and this will set up the swap. Both the funding transaction and the invoice reference the pre-image. Then there's the execution step where the funding transaction will be published or just made public in some way so that the other side of the swap can see it and verify that their counterparty is doing what they say they're doing. And then the invoice will get paid, which will reveal the pre-image, and both sides will now be able to claim their funds. So this is all kind of a little abstract, so we'll get into an example of how someone that has money on Lightning and someone that has money on chain could perform a swap like this. So we'll meet our friends Alice and Bob. Alice will say, "Hey Bob, got any sats on Lightning?" So in this case, Alice has some Bitcoin on chain, and Bob has maybe a Lightning node or something like that. And Bob's like, "Sure do, Alice. I'll trade you for some on-chain sats." So here, Alice will send Bob money in an on-chain transaction, but only if Bob pays her Lightning invoice. So we want this is the idea of the atomic swap. We don't want Alice to send a transaction to Bob and Bob just to run away with her money. We want to make sure that if Bob gets his money, he has to pay Alice. And same for Bob. If he's going to pay Alice, he wants to be sure that he gets his money. And so it's atomic in that way, where if one side fails, then both sides fail. And to understand this, I'm going to tell you about Schrodinger's cat. So I'm going to use this as an analogy for hash functions. Don't think too much about it or take it too seriously, because Schrodinger's cat was designed as a thought experiment to kind of show how absurd quantum mechanics is. So it'll be a good absurd example of hash functions. So the way that Schrodinger's cat works is you take a cat and you put it in a box with some radioactive material and some poison. And that radioactive material will randomly decay. It may decay or it may not. And if it does, it'll break the vial of poison and kill the cat. So if you close the cat in the box, the question is the cat dead or alive? And according to quantum mechanics, it's both dead and alive. But the point that I'm trying to make here is there's no way to know whether the cat is dead or alive unless you look in the box and you see the cat. So I'm going to use this in a second to explain hash functions for this setup phase here. So Alice is setting up the swap. And to start, she's going to create a big random number called the pre-image, and she's going to hash it. So that looks something like this, where she takes the pre-image and she runs it through the hash function SHA-256, which is a one-way function. So you take some input and you get some output, which we call the hash. So this is the equivalent of closing the box. And now the only way to know what's inside the box is to see the pre-image. So you can't take the hash and do something with it to get the pre-image. You have to start with the pre-image, go through SHA-256, and then compare it to the hash. What we can do with this is I can show everyone the hash, and this is basically me committing to the pre-image because everyone can look at it, and later I can reveal the pre-image, and every pre-image should map to a unique hash. So if I reveal the pre-image, you'll hash it, and then you'll know that prior to, or like when I showed you the hash, that I also knew the pre-image. So Alice has created the pre-image, and now she can create the contracts. Oh, that one picture disappeared, and now it's back, so now there's two. But this is the funding transaction that references that hash, and this will be an on-chain transaction. And she's also going to create a Lightning invoice. So you can see the on-chain transaction and the invoice are both referencing the same hash. This is what the funding transaction might look like. I don't recommend using it, but if you want, you could try. But so this is some Bitcoin script here. So this is what I mean by smart contracting abilities. We have two sections, like two branches in this contract where either Alice can get a refund by creating a signature, but she has to wait for block 890,900. Or, so that's like the refund path after some timeout. Or if Bob learns the pre-image, he can use that and prove that he knows the pre-image by hashing it. And then it gets compared to the hash in this transaction. And then he'll also need to prove that he is Bob by using his private key to sign it. And then on the Lightning side, you could go to lightningdecoder.com and put in the Lightning invoice. And what you'll see when it gets decoded is that it has this payment hash in it. And it's referencing the same hash, or it is the same hash as what will be in the funding transaction. So now it's all set up. And Alice is going to say that she published the funding transaction. And this was my guess for what the block height would be, but we already passed it, so I was wrong. So Alice tells Bob that she published the transaction, and she gives Bob the invoice. So now Bob wants to go check his node, and make sure that there is a transaction that references the same hash as what's in the invoice he just got from Alice. He wants to make sure it's not like still in the mempool. It has to be mined into a block. Otherwise, he can't be sure that Alice won't run away with his money. So Alice gives him the invoice, and he goes, checks out the blockchain, confirms everything's good. And so at this point, Alice knows the pre-image, but Bob only knows the hash. And so then what we have to do is make the Lightning payment. So Bob wants to figure out what the pre-image is in order to get his money on chain. So he makes a Lightning payment, and a Lightning payment is a series of atomic swaps from like one party to the next. And it uses these things called HTLCs, which actually look very similar, or the logic is very similar to that funding transaction, where you have kind of like one path where the payment can get forwarded, or there's a timeout path. And that's because Charlie doesn't want to pay Dave unless Bob pays Charlie. So it has to all go through atomically. So the way that happens, we kind of go back to that setup phase of the atomic swap. And Bob, he knows the hash. He passes it along. Charlie passes it to Dave. And then Dave gives it to Alice. And the way that the Lightning Network works is Dave doesn't actually know that Alice is the final destination in this route. He just knows that she's the next hop, but he doesn't really care. All he's really saying is, prove the cat is dead or alive, and I'll pay you. So, and then there's like these timeouts, kind of the times in each of them is staggered so that like the transaction has to flow all the way through, or if like Charlie doesn't pay Dave, then none of it happens. So now that series of atomic swaps is set up, the Lightning payment's going to go from Bob to Alice, and Alice will get that, and she knows what the pre-image is. So she's going to pass that back along the route, eventually getting to Bob. And by the time it gets to Bob, the Lightning payment will be complete, and he will now have learned the pre-image. So at this point, Bob has the pre-image, and Alice got her payment on the Lightning Network. So she has some Lightning wallet, and now she has money in there. Bob has the pre-image that can unlock this transaction that's already mined on chain. And so now Bob can claim his money. And the point here is, if you can go to Lightning, you can go anywhere. So like I said, even if you're in Cashew, you can go all the way on chain. And if you're on chain, then you can make a Lightning payment to get into these other protocols. And there's services that you can use to do this. Like one is Bolts, and they charge some fee to perform this swap for you. But like if you have a cold storage wallet and then you like want to use Lightning at the conference, so you download a Cashew wallet, but you're like, how do I get money in here? You can use Bolts to make an on-chain transaction, and they'll do the atomic swap for you. and then now you have money on Lightning in your Cashew wallet. So now we're going to talk about some of these protocols specifically. The first one is Spark, and it's inspired by state chains, and the address that the Bitcoin is in is this like shared signature address between the user and Spark operators. So Spark operators are just these entities running the Spark software that kind of help facilitate validating and transferring these transactions between users. So if I'm sending to someone in the crowd, then I have to talk to the Spark operator, and they kind of help facilitate this transaction. It is relatively self-custodial. There's some big asterisks there, but once a transaction is finalized, then as a user of Spark, you'll have a unilateral exit transaction, which means if the Spark disappears, you have this transaction that you could publish on chain and get your money, so you don't need to rely on the Spark there. But to transact within the Spark, they do have to be acting honestly and online. It has a 1 out of n trust model, so there is that big asterisk is around the transfer. During the transfer time, while the transaction's in limbo, you kind of have to trust that these operators are doing what they say that they're doing. But there could be multiple Spark operators, and you only have to trust one of them. So all the other ones could be acting maliciously. As long as you trust one, then it's all good. They have support for LRC20, which allows us to do things like stable coins on Lightning. And then, of course, they support Lightning. So we're going to look at how we can pay a Lightning invoice as a user of Spark. So here, Alice is going to pay Bob. Bob has some wallet that supports Lightning, and Alice has a Spark wallet. She only has funds on Spark. She doesn't have any Lightning channels. She can't directly pay Lightning invoices. But there's these things called Spark bridges that run a Lightning node, and they speak Spark. They understand the Spark protocol. So these bridges can make Lightning payments, but they can also move funds around within Spark. So the atomic swap here is going to be between Alice and the bridge, because Alice wants to pay the bridge only if the bridge pays Bob. And again, this is going to have 3 steps. So the first step will be the setup, where Bob will create an invoice using his wallet that he wants Alice to pay. And he'll give that to Alice, and then Alice and the Spark operator, or the Spark bridge, will work together to create the funding transaction. And basically, this funding transaction will say, Alice will give the bridge money if the bridge can prove to Alice that it knows the preimage. So the execution step is the bridge pays Bob's invoice. And the bridge is okay with paying Bob's invoice because it already created this funding transaction. So it can be sure, it knows by paying the invoice that it will receive the preimage because of how the Lightning Network works. And so it can safely make the Lightning payment. And once it makes the payment, that preimage gets routed back to the bridge, and the bridge can use that to spend the funding transaction. And now what's happened is the bridge made a Lightning payment, it decreased its balance on Lightning, and it increased its balance on Spark. Moving on to Fediment. Fediment is a federated eCash system. So it uses this idea of guardians, where guardians are individuals running the Fediment software, each holding a set of keys, and these guardians work together to collaboratively custody users' funds. And Fediment is Byzantine fault tolerant, so the amount of guardians that we need can be calculated with this 3n plus 1, where n is the number of parties that can be malicious. So if we're okay with having one malicious party, then we need 4 guardians. And if you're okay with 2 malicious people, then we need 7 guardians. And because of that, Fediman is kind of going after communities. So they're trying to create these federations within a community, because if you know who the people are that are custodying your money, then they're much less likely to run away with it, because there is still some trust involved here. If multiple people get together, then they can decide to run away with the money. So Fediment uses eCash, which makes it private, meaning transfers within the mint. If I send Alice some money, the mint doesn't know that like transaction occurred or who has what money. Again, it's federated. One of a really interesting feature that I like with Fediment is the modular design of it. So they've created this consensus mechanism where all the guardians can kind of come to agreement on the state of things, but the things that they're agreeing on can really be anything. So there's an on-chain module and there's an eCash module, but there's also could be like a chat module. So you could have the federation run some chat server, and you as users, you don't have to like put your chats into the cloud. The federation kind of becomes like the community's self-hosting service. And of course, Fediment supports Lightning, and they have something, it's basically the same thing as the Spark Bridge, but they call them gateways, Lightning gateways. And for this example, we're going to go in the opposite direction. So we're going to see how we can use atomic swaps to receive into a Fediment. So Alice, again, she has a Fediment wallet, but that's it. And she wants to receive money from Bob, who can only pay Lightning invoices, or Bob doesn't understand the Fediment protocol, but he understands Lightning. So we're going to use the gateway for this, and the pre-images are going to be revealed through the federation. So the federation, both Alice and the gateway, will trust this federation to kind of help facilitate this transaction. But maybe they're part of the community, or they know who the guardians are, and so they're okay with this little bit of trust here. So again, it's going to be 3 steps. There's the setup phase where Alice will create the invoice that Bob is going to pay. And this invoice will have some route hints in it that allow Bob's Lightning wallet to find the gateway. So this invoice will be like sort of a treasure map to the gateway. And she's also going to create the sort of funding transaction, but it won't be funded yet. But it's basically this contract that she gives to the federation that will sell the pre-image, or create an offer to sell the pre-image to the gateway. So Alice is saying, I have this hash, and I'll give you the pre-image to the hash if you send me some money for it. So then to execute the swap, Bob will pay the invoice. And by the time the payment reaches the gateway, it will sort of be in the state of limbo, because the gateway doesn't yet know the pre-image. In order for the Lightning payment to be completed, the gateway needs to learn the pre-image. So in order to do that, the gateway will effectively buy the pre-image from Alice, and so it knows it saw that contract in the federation, and it can match the hash in that contract to the HTLC that it just received in that pending Lightning payment. And so what it will do is it will conditionally send Alice money, but this money will be locked to the condition that Alice reveals the pre-image. So if Alice gives Bob, or gives the gateway, the pre-image, then Alice will get her money. So then the gateway sends Alice the money. She is forced to reveal the pre-image. The gateway can now complete the Lightning payment. And now the kind of same thing that happened with the Spark bridge happened, but in the opposite direction. So the gateway had money, had Fedimint eCash, and it transferred it to Alice, but it increased its balance on the Lightning side, and maybe it charges some fee from Alice. So maybe if it received 10,000 sats, it only sent Alice 9,800, but Alice agreed to those fees ahead of time. So then the payment has been completed. Moving on to Cashew, uses Trust Me Bro consensus. I don't know if that's a real thing, but sounds right. Doesn't use atomic swaps. So it's just, you have a single custodian running a Lightning node on top of the Mint is on top of the Lightning node. And the Mint is just some software that issues signatures in exchange for Bitcoin. And Cashew also uses Chaumian eCash, which is sort of the same thing that Fedimint uses. But again, Cashew is single custodian, whereas Fedimint has multiple guardians. And from cashew.space, the documentation page for Cashew, they say, Cashew brings simplicity back to online payments, which is sort of why I think it's worth talking about, even though in the ideal world, everything is trustless. We don't have to trust anyone, but I think that that's not realistic, not the world that we live in. There is always going to be trust involved. Even if you're just using Bitcoin, we're all kind of very few people have actually gone through the code and validated that it's doing what it says it's doing. So at a certain point, we're still trusting the people that tell us that Bitcoin does what it does. But because of that simplicity, we're able to do a lot more with Cashew. Because it uses eCash, it's private, it's bearer. So what I mean by bearer is it has these tokens. On the left is an animated QR code because these tokens can get quite long. So we animate the QR code so that it's easier for a phone to scan it all. But on the right, you can see that's what's inside the QR code. It's just a bunch of characters, and that is the money. It's digital cash. So if someone has this token, then they have the IOU from the Mint, and they can then ask the Mint to make Lightning payments for them on their behalf. And the cool thing about this is the money, the token is the money. So I can make a transaction offline. I could put it on a USB stick. I can text it to people. I could post it on Nostr and let people race to claim it. And again, it's custodial, which I think is a feature, not a bug. It allows us to make much faster transactions and kind of be much more flexible because we don't have to add this complexity of atomic swaps and all that. And Lightning, Cashew still supports Lightning, even though it doesn't use atomic swaps to do so. We can still use Cashew to send and receive on the Lightning network. And the way that works is we have Alice and the Mint. So again, the Mint is running a Lightning node, and then running the Mint software. So Alice will make a Lightning payment to the Mint, and the Mint will send some Cashew tokens back to Alice, which are just IOUs. It's the Mint signed a piece of paper, and it's you sent me 10 sats, so I owe you 10 sats. And now Alice can make a Lightning payment. So she can take that IOU and give it back to the Mint. The Mint will look at it and be like, yeah, I think that looks like something I signed. I'll make the Lightning payment for you on your behalf. So no atomic swaps involved. It's just you're trusting the Mint to hold your money already. They could shut their Lightning node off. They could close their channels and disappear tomorrow. So there's no need to add the complexity of an atomic swap because it's unnecessary. So finally, I'm going to touch a little bit on Nostr Wallet Connect. And Nostr Wallet Connect is a way that we can connect Lightning wallets to apps. And when I say Lightning wallets, I just mean any wallet that can create Lightning invoices and pay Lightning invoices. So it could be from any of these protocols that I talked about. It could be your Lightning node. could be anything. And it uses Nostr as the messaging layer. So if anyone here has used Nostr, it's probably in the context of social media, but we can use it also as a way to relay messages between applications. And it looks something like this. This graphic is from nwc.dev, which you can go to learn more about how Nostr Wallet Connect works. But the basic idea is here we have the app, and here we have some Bitcoin wallet. And the Bitcoin wallet and the app are going to create a connection. So the wallet will just issue this connection string that it gives to the app, and the app can now use this to send requests to the wallet, and the wallet will be able to validate that that this app has permission to make these requests. So in this example, the app will request the wallet to pay an invoice. So it'll send a message and drop it on a Nostr relay, and then the wallet will be listening on that relay, and it'll pick up the request, make sure that the connection is valid, and then pay the invoice in that request. And the reason that we use Nostr here and why I think it's a powerful tool is because it allows, you don't have to directly connect to the wallet. So I don't know if you guys have set up like a Lightning node on your Umbrel or something, and either you need to connect over Tor or Tailscale. Somehow you need to get out of your home network, and that can at times be challenging. So by using relays, both services just connect to the relay, and then it makes this communication much easier. So with this, we can use our various apps and wallets. So in this case, maybe you want to go on Amazon and they decide to support Lightning. And instead of putting in your credit card, you put in your Nostr wallet connection string. So then whenever you want to buy stuff, you send a request to your Spark wallet, and your Spark wallet will pay the invoice at checkout. Or another example could be on Nostr. You're trying to zap your friends, and you have a Fedimint wallet. You can connect to some Nostr client, like Primal or Nostrudel, and you can use Nostr Wallet Connect to pay people using your Fedimint wallet. Or here, this picture is trying to show a subscription, a recurring payment. So maybe some streaming service that you want to pay 10,000 sats to a month. You can connect with Nostr Wallet Connect, and now you're giving that service permission to pull 10,000 sats a month, and that could be coming from your Cashew wallet. So with that, Lightning is Bitcoin's connective tissue, and I think this kind of idea of Lightning being the connective tissue, or people talk about it as like Bitcoin's lingua franca, isn't necessarily a novel idea, but I wanted to focus on protocols that work today. Like, we don't need any upgrades to Bitcoin. We can do these things today. And some apps that you can try out if maybe you want to send and receive on Lightning, but you don't want to run a Lightning node, you could go to cashew.me. That's a Cashew wallet. You go to fedi.xyz and download the Fedi app and start interacting with various federations. AlbiGo is an app that lets you control your node or some wallet with Nostr Wallet Connect. And then Spark, as far as I know, doesn't have any existing implementations. That's the project that I've been working on for a while, and I was hoping to have it ready, but it's not. But what I'm building is a app that kind of tries to take these various protocols and stick them into a single interface. So depending on the features that you want, like maybe you want bearer tokens and you want to be able to text your friends money, then you can use Cashew. You can use the same app to control your node with Nostr Wallet Connect, or you can use Spark. So I was hoping to have some demos and let you guys try that out, but it's not quite ready yet.